Jim's whistle, gentlemen. Good luck, have fun. Rubber side down. Sliders ready. There we go.
What is up, y'all? This is the Mobile Cycling Classic Crit 2024. This is my first crit of the year, also my first result of the year, so pretty psyched about that. I've already been doing a little bit of road racing, including the day before this, so we had a 3-hour road race that was absolutely brutal. I did some bonkers numbers, as did all of our guys, working really hard for Zach, who cleaned up the field sprint and got second on the day. Time trial after that, and Zach sitting second on the overall for the Omnium coming into this race. That really informed our plan coming into this crit. So priority number 1 is to preserve Zach's overall. Priority number 2 is to get us a result in this race. This is the end of lap 1. There's some kind of preem on this lap, and we've got Max Abner from NGCA lighting it up for this preem. I believe Taylor Heron, comes over at the top of him from Marks Bernsdorf. He's been really consistent toward the beginning of this season. He rolls through for that preem. These guys start to look at each other. I look back and realize we have separation and decide I'm going to just push on, because my role here is to get in moves to take the pressure off Zach. That's really why I started following Abner when he went. We've especially got to follow anything that NGCA is in. They're the other big team in this race, so we have 5 total. I believe they have 8 or 9 in this field, and they have the overall lead. So basically, if anything gets away without them, it's on them to chase it. But if anything gets away with them that we are not in, it's on us to chase it, which is what ended up happening in the road race. I don't want that to happen again. And I'm locked in with Eric Nelson from Velovit here. This guy is a really, really good time trialist, and not that I think that the first lap breakaway is going to roll, but this is definitely a good guy to be in here and get it moving with. So Zach knows the guys that are closest to him on points in the Omnium, and he's really focused on following those wheels. The one that comes to mind is Patton Sims from Good Guys Racing. Patton is in a really interesting position here because he's one of the strongest riders in the race for sure, but he has no teammates, and he's also kind of sitting on the bubble. He was like 4th or 5th on the overall going into this, so he's really eager to get into a move and get something going, but he doesn't have anyone to help him get that done. Because of all those little races within the race, the first 20 minutes or so is really cagey. You can see it's slowed down here, and then NGCA launches. We cover it. Once it's covered by us, everybody else sort of speeds up because there are all these individual riders that don't want to miss the move that's going to roll. And that becomes increasingly likely the more of these things happen and the more Skyway and NGCA riders are in it to work together. So we're trying to find the perfect combination for these first several laps, and it's a lot of this go really, really hard, launch something, go really fast, gets back together and slows back down because nobody wants to set pace. Kind of what I expected, for the third race of 3 with a really hard road race and time trial yesterday. I got to give a shout out to everybody we had on the team for this weekend. It felt like we were really firing on all cylinders. Jay and Christian are both Cat 3s, but they were up here racing at the front of the Pro 1-2 field, covering moves, doing work, and just staying switched on. And same thing with John, who's in front of me right here. This is his first season. He had some success as a Cat 2 last year, been racing a long time, but this is his first season really racing with a team, and I saw him improving even like moment to moment throughout the weekend in terms of his decision making as like a team-based rider. We had one really good teachable moment from the road race, and I think it's something a lot of people struggle with, so I'm going to share it. John got into a really early move, probably first 10 miles, maybe 15 miles in, with Max Abner from NGCA, who I mentioned earlier. Max was pulling crazy hard turns. I mean, his pace was insane. After about 10 minutes, John looked at it and said, "This power is not sustainable for me, and also I don't think this move is going to go to the line. I don't think I've chosen the right one here, so I'm going to go back to the field." When he got back to the field, then we had to put our whole squad on the front to chase. And I think John's instinct was correct if he's racing solo, which he has in many cases before. You look at the move, and if it's not the move, you say, "I'm not going to waste any more energy with this," and you go back to the field. The move meaning the move that's going to go all the way to the line, because when you're solo, your own result is kind of the only thing you have to work for. But what I explained to him is in this situation, when he comes back to the field, that actually takes the onus off of all of the individual riders. And there were a lot of riders that were either by themselves or with one teammate in that race. And the second that he comes back to the field from that move, that really puts the onus on Skyway, because now we're the biggest team here. here and we don't have anyone in the break. So that kind of gave all of the individual guys an armchair ride. But he immediately got his head around that and was racing differently sort of from that point forward. And even in that race, he really put himself on the cross to bring back some moves. Later in that race, set pace all the way to the line and make sure that Zach was in a position to get on the podium. So it was moment to moment, the guys were learning and growing and getting better and better. It was awesome to see. So this is almost exactly 35 minutes in. It's been really on and off up to this point. It's currently off, and Emil Abraham in front of me recognizes he's got a little bit of momentum, an open door, things are slowing down, and he launches out here to the left. If you don't know who Emil is, he's a little bit of a crit legend, former national champion of Trinidad and Tobago, has been on the podium of Athens Twilight Pro Race, raced for Bissell back in the day. He's more or less retired from pro racing, and he, I think, runs this NGCA team, but I know he definitely co-promotes this race weekend. I want to get into the alchemy of what makes this break work because, spoiler alert, this is the break that goes to the line. We went from 35 minutes in all the way to 75 minutes, and Emil being the promoter of this race weekend is actually part of it. So on Saturday, being co-promoter, Emil did not race the road race or TT. There was just too much work to do between those two events to get everything squeezed in one day. But this Pro 1-2 race is the last event of the weekend, so he can kind of hop in here, and all that is left to do is clean up.
You got daylight, let's lock in.
Locked in for greatness today because it's time to absolutely hammer.
So he's bringing a few things to this break that help make it work. The first one is just fresh legs. He didn't do the long road race yesterday or the time trial, so he's a little bit fresher than everybody else. When he decided to launch, he had a lot of pop there. You saw I had to do 1100 watts to get on his wheel. We got separation pretty quickly off of that first little jump. The other thing that not racing yesterday gets him is no points in the Omnium, which means anybody who's hyper aware of their position in the Omnium probably has a few folks that they are paying special attention to the same way Zach does, and he is not going to be on any of their radars. That's especially important for the guys I mentioned earlier who are out here racing without a team. When you're on your own, you can't chase every single move yourself, so you got to kind of pick and choose your battles, and this is probably one that they all decided not to pick. It's not as important to them. Again, if they're worried about their placing on the overall, Emil's not going to jump them. Another thing this break has going for it is the rider that just pulled through here. This is Will Warrett from Velo Brew, and one thing, just having a third rider, for a break that has to go this long, the more the merrier, as long as everybody's working together smoothly, and he is a rider, like I mentioned, with no teammates, so he's going to be extra motivated to roll this break smoothly and continue working, because for him, this is the best possible scenario he can hope for. He's in a move with the two biggest teams in the race. That should mean that my whole team, Skyway, is not chasing, Emil's whole team, NGCA, is not chasing, so just mathematically, that takes the most possible riders off the table for the chase behind. So a rider in Will's position doesn't really even have motivation to drop Emil and I, because as soon as he does, our team will start chasing, and he's going to have to start taking 50% more pulls. So everyone in this break is properly motivated to work together really smoothly, and that is basically what we do for a long while. This is my data from the full race, and you can see that section on the left is the beginning where we were covering attacks and in the group, and then this highlighted portion is much, much smoother. This 30-minute section is basically the time that this group got together and rolled really smooth turns. After that initial spike in power to get on Emil's wheel, my power stays really consistent and my heart rate is basically a flat line for a lot of this, and that's indicative of a group that's working really, really well together. You'll notice now we got one more NGCA rider with us in the white and red jerseys, and there was a point where that guy was kind of dangling between the two groups. Emil dropped off of me and Will, and he paced that guy back up to us, and I wanted to just keep it steady. Will and I just kept taking our turns as we were so that we weren't giving a gap back to the group, and we knew if we fully dropped NGCA, the whole team would start chasing, so it's I would rather have those two riders get back to us and be 2-on-2 than, completely reshuffle the deck and have to start from scratch again. So the group behind never fully gave up and let us off the leash. We kind of dangled out there at 30-45 seconds for most of the race, so we were barely visible on the longest straightaway, just kind of going around the next corner, which is extremely tempting for guys in the group to try to get to us, and I believe this is the moment that a group catches. You see Eric there, who I mentioned earlier. The dynamic behind was basically that NGCA was covering everything like white on rice, and whenever someone like Eric would try to go across, someone who was not on NGCA or Skyway, NGCA would send someone with it, and that person would sit on and get a free ride to the breakaway. Whenever one of those groups trying to come across had someone that we were worried about for the overall in it, Skyway was also jumping on it, and when a single rider or a couple of riders without teams are towing both Skyway and NGCA, they would generally give up and shut that one down. So the only moves that made it across to us were a mix of 1 or 2 individual riders with 1 or 2 NGCA riders, and this break swelled to 8 or 9, I think, by the final, and then it was time to stop playing nice and start playing games.
We play games with each other too.
That acceleration you just saw was the first shot across the bow from NGCA. They have numbers in this move now, and they're looking to use that to their advantage. So pretty classic move there by Chad Conley of NGCA, formerly of Automatic. I believe he won the first edition of Birmingham Hammerfest back in 2017 or 2018 to be USA Crits race, and then raced for Automatic for a few years after that, few seasons up to the pandemic, I believe. We talked earlier about that smooth part of the power file in the middle there where the group was working together really well. This is where the power file gets a lot less smooth. You can see all of these little spikes here are attacks, all of which are from NGCA, I believe, and all of which I had to cover. I knew this was going to be the case. This is the smartest way for NGCA to use their numbers. They're the only team with more than 1 in this group, so it makes sense for them to send what we call machine gun attacks, where one rider from your team attacks, the rest sit on to the chase. When it gets brought back, the next one attacks, and eventually you hope that you can break the group. You can see zooming in on one here, I'm having to put out some pretty significant power, over 1,000 watts, to jump on these things, but it's worth it to glue them back together as quickly as possible so that I can respond to all of them. So I've basically got my peripheral vision just like completely tuned in, and as soon as I hear someone shifting gears, as soon as I see anyone accelerating, I'm already winding it up and jumping on straight away. Luckily for me, a bunch of anaerobic spikes, a bunch of little accelerations is kind of my bread and butter, so I'm right at home covering all these things. So after several of these attempts, boom, 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 they decide to just get together and go full traditional lead-out mode for the finale. So all of us who aren't on GCA really spent the last couple of laps battling for the last spot behind their train. And you can see there's a rider on my inside here. I've just chosen to kind of take the left-hand side because I think that's where I'm not going to get pinched off or shut out. This is actually the narrowest section of the course right here, but as we go around this final corner, it really widens out. So I knew if I took that side, I wouldn't get pinched off. Even if, like you see on the left here, a rider pulls off, I'll still have room to run. I could have done much better on this sprint. I should have kept it a lot tighter to Chad's wheel. That's Emil Abraham leading out Chad Conley there. I am making a little ground, but I don't quite get there. I'm going to give myself like a 5 out of 10 for positioning on that sprint. More like a 7 out of 10 on power. I actually was looking okay there, but power doesn't matter if you're not in the right position, so lesson learned there. Really happy with that. First podium of the season. Really fun race here. A lot to talk about, a lot to think about. And in case you're wondering, Zach won the field sprint behind, which kept him on the podium for the Omnium. I was on the podium for this race, so all in all, a really good day out.